Dana Whitfield had owned the back acreage situated behind her house for 9 full years before anything interesting happened on it. It was a flat, weedy stretch bordering the old county road, useful mostly for nothing, too rocky for a real garden, too far from the house to bother mowing every week. She used it only to store a broken trailer, and not much else. Then one spring morning, she woke up to the sound of diesel engines and found 2 flatbed trucks, backed onto her land, unloading thick slabs of maple wood into uneven stacks. By the time she got outside in her boots and robe, the drivers were already pulling away. She called the number painted on the truck door. A tired-sounding man named Russ picked up and explained, somewhat sheepishly, that his sawmill had been told by the previous landowner, her uncle, who'd passed the property to her, that they could use the back lot as overflow storage. Nobody had updated the paperwork. Nobody had asked her. "We'll come get it," Russ said. "Give us a few weeks." A few weeks turned into 2 months, then 3. Dana called twice more, got the same apologetic promise, and finally gave up chasing it. She had a full-time job at a regional insurance office and 2 teenagers who ate like grown men. She didn't have bandwidth to argue with a sawmill about wood nobody seemed to want. So she did what people do with things they can't get rid of. She started looking at it differently. She walked out to the Slabs one Saturday with a cup of coffee, expecting scrap. What she found instead were 40-some pieces of rough-cut maple, 2 to 3 inches thick, some over 8 feet long, with raw, irregular edges called live edges, that she vaguely remembered seeing in a furniture catalog her sister had once shown her. The bark was peeling in places. A few slabs had cracked ends, but underneath the surface grime, the wood grain was tight, pale, and strikingly clean. The kind of maple that takes a stain evenly and doesn't warp easily once dried. Dana wasn't a woodworker. She'd never built anything bigger than a birdhouse kit from a craft store. But she was, by training and temperament, a details person, the kind of insurance adjuster who actually read the fine print for fun. She started reading instead about wood moisture content, kiln drying, and live-edge furniture trends. She learned that rough-cut slabs like hers, if dried and finished properly, were exactly the kind of material small furniture makers were paying real money for, especially with the rustic, organic look so many home renovators wanted for dining tables and console pieces. She also learned the slabs needed to dry slowly, stacked with spacers called stickers between each layer to let air circulate, or they'd crack and become useless. So on a free weekend, she recruited her older son and a neighbor with a truck, and they restacked all 40-some slabs under the cover of an old hay shed on the property, laying scrap lumber between layers exactly the way a forum post had instructed. Then she waited. Wood like that takes the better part of a year to air dry properly, sometimes longer for the thickest pieces. She used the time to learn. She watched videos on sanding and finishing. She bought a cheap orbital sander and practiced on a busted slab nobody would miss, testing different oils and stains until she found a combination that brought out the maple's pale gold color without looking glossy or fake. She also did something that turned out to matter more than the sanding. She photographed everything, every slab, every grain pattern, every length and width, logged in a notebook with rough measurements. When a coworker mentioned her cousin was renovating a farmhouse kitchen and wanted a real wood island top, Dana pulled out her notebook instead of saying she didn't have anything to offer. That first sale, a single island top, sanded and oiled in her garage over 2 weekends, went for $400. It wasn't much, but it told her something. People wanted this. People were willing to pay for a single, honest slab of wood with visible grain and a story behind it. She kept going slowly, selling one piece every month or two, mostly to people in her own town who heard about the Maple Lady through word of mouth. She built a simple online listing with her photos and basic dimensions, nothing fancy, and a short description explaining the wood had come from a local sawmill and air-dried on her property. Buyers liked that detail. It made the piece feel less like a product and more like a small piece of local history. By the second year, Dana had outgrown her garage. She converted half the old hayshed into a proper workspace, installing better lighting and buying a planer second-hand from a retiring cabinet maker 2 counties over. The planer changed everything. It let her flatten and finish slabs in hours instead of days of hand sanding, and it gave her surfaces clean enough to sell as finished tabletops rather than raw material. She also began learning basic joinery so she could offer simple bases. Steel hairpin legs were easy to source and install, and they paired well with the rustic look of the maple tops. A coffee table with a live-edge maple top and black hairpin legs became her signature piece, something she could produce in a weekend and sell for triple what the raw slab alone would fetch. Word kept spreading. A local interior designer found her listings and started recommending her to clients who wanted custom dining tables. Dana said yes to her first big commission with her stomach in knots, an 8-foot dining table for a family renovating their lake house. She used one of the largest original slabs, the one she'd worried for a year might be too cracked to use, carefully filling the splits with a tinted resin she'd practiced on smaller test pieces first. The finished table, glossy where the resin caught the light and pale gold everywhere else, sold for $2,800. That commission became the turning point. She quit chasing odd jobs and started treating the business like a real operation. Even though she kept her insurance job for the steady paycheck and health coverage, she set up a simple website, hired a part-time helper for sanding and finishing on weekends, and began tracking expenses and income properly instead of just stuffing receipts in a shoebox. The original pile of slabs eventually ran out. Of course, there had only ever been a few dozen pieces, however large. But by then, Dana understood the supply chain well enough to keep going. She reached back out to Russ at the Sawmill, this time not to complain, but to ask if they had more slabs they didn't have buyers for. It turned out Sawmills routinely set aside oddly shaped or extra thick cuts that didn't fit standard lumber processing, and most of it ended up burned or chipped because nobody wanted to deal with the slow drying process. Dana offered to take it off their hands for a modest price, sparing them the hassle of disposal. Russ agreed, and what began as an accidental delivery became an ongoing arrangement. Every few months, a truck would bring more slabs, not just maple now, but walnut, oak, and the occasional spalted piece with dark, marbled streaks running through it that buyers especially loved. Dana paid a fair price for each load, kept her drying and stacking process exactly as careful as she had the first time, and slowly built a small but steady inventory pipeline that no longer depended on luck. 3 years after that first morning with the diesel engines, Dana's business, now formally named Whitfield Slab Works, crossed 6 figures in annual revenue. She still worked her insurance job 2 days a week, partly out of habit, and partly because she liked the people there, but the furniture business had become the real engine of her household income. She'd hired a second part-time worker, built a proper finishing room with a dust collection system, and started teaching evening classes on basic slab finishing for hobbyists who wanted to learn what she'd taught herself from forum posts and trial and error. When people asked her how she'd built a business out of what was essentially someone else's or mistake, Dana usually laughed and told them the truth. She hadn't built anything out of nothing. She'd simply refused to let good material go to waste while she figured out what to do with it. The sawmill's unplanned delivery gave her raw material, but the years of patient drying, careful sanding, and steady relationship building were what turned 40 stacked slabs of maple into something that paid her mortgage. The old hay shed still stood at the back of her land, though it barely resembled its original self now. Insulated walls, proper lighting, a row of clamps along one side, and the gentle hum of a dust collector running most days. Out past the shed, the spot where the trucks had first dumped their load was empty grass again, mowed regularly, with nothing to mark it except Dana's memory of walking out there with a cup of coffee, expecting to find scrap, and finding instead the beginning of something worth building. She kept one slab from that very first delivery, a narrow offcut, too small to sell, propped against the wall of her finishing room. It still had a strip of original bark along one edge, rough and unfinished, exactly as it had looked the morning the trucks pulled away without asking, a small, weathered reminder of where everything began. She liked having it there, a small reminder that sometimes the most useful thing on a piece of sank land is the thing nobody else wanted, and the most valuable skill in business is simply paying attention before deciding something is worthless, instead of rushing to judgment too quickly. There were setbacks along the way that Dana rarely mentioned in interviews but never forgot. One of the largest walnut slabs, delivered in her second year of buying from Russ, cracked clean through during its first winter because she'd floor stacked it too close to a drafty wall, and the temperature swings pulled the moisture out unevenly. She lost nearly $300 of material on that single piece, and spent a weekend reading everything she could find about humidity control before rebuilding her drying area with proper airflow gaps and a simple plastic sheeting barrier to slow seasonal swings. She kept the cracked walnut piece for almost a year, unwilling to throw it out, until she finally cut it down into a set of small charcuterie boards that sold out within a week at a local farmer's market. It taught her that even a failure, handled patiently, could be repurposed into something useful. Money was tight in those early years, too. She remembered sitting at her kitchen table with her husband, Mark, going over the numbers from her first dozen sales and realizing that after the cost of sandpaper, finish, and gas for hauling slabs to buyers, she'd cleared barely enough to cover the orbital sander she'd bought used. Mark, who worked maintenance for the school district, never once suggested she stop. He helped her build the first set of sturdy work tables out of scrap 2x4s, and on weekends he'd haul finished pieces in his truck while she handled the customer calls. Their daughter, only 12 at the time, used to sit on an overturned bucket in the shed doing homework while Dana sanded nearby, the two of them trading stories about their days over the steady hum of the machine. Dana also learned hard lessons about pricing. Her first big dining table commission, the 8-footer for the Lake House family, took nearly 60 hours of labor once she counted the resin work, the sanding, and the delivery, and she realized afterward that $2,800 barely covered her time at a reasonable wage. She raised her prices gradually after that, nervous each time that customers would balk, but most didn't. People renovating their homes, she discovered, valued the story and the visible labor behind a piece nearly as much as the wood itself, and they were willing to pay accordingly once she learned to explain that value clearly in her listings. By her 4th year, Dana had developed a reputation specific enough that people occasionally found her through a flooring contractor 2 towns over, who liked to recommend her for matching dining sets when his clients asked about reclaimed wood accents. That contractor became one of her steadiest referral sources, sending her 2 or 3 serious customers every season without ever asking for anything in return beyond an occasional discount on a small side table for his own porch. She also started keeping a small logbook of customer stories alongside her wood inventory. Notes, something she began almost by accident when a woman crying happy tears at pickup explained that the dining table she'd just bought would be the first new furniture she and her husband had purchased together after years of using hand-me-downs. Dana found she liked remembering those moments nearly as much as she liked the woodworking itself, and over time, the business became less about the maple specifically and more about the quiet satisfaction of turning overlooked material into something a family would gather around for decades. She eventually added a small showroom inside a converted corner of the shed, just 3 finished pieces at a time rotating through, so visiting customers could run their hands across a real tabletop before committing to a custom order. It was a modest setup, nothing like a real furniture store, but it gave the business a sense of permanence that the early garage days never had, and it gave Dana a quiet pride every time she walked through and saw strangers admiring wood that had once sat forgotten in tall, uneven stacks behind her house. Today, Whitfield Slab Works ships custom tabletops and furniture pieces across 3 states, and Dana still personally inspects every slab that arrives on her land before it goes into the drying stacks. Her sons, now in their 20s, occasionally help with deliveries on weekends, and her daughter has taken over the company's social media, posting before and after photos of raw slabs transforming into finished dining tables for customers across the region. None of it happened quickly, and none of it happened the way Dana expected when she first found 2 trucks unloading wood she hadn't ordered. But 9 years after inheriting an empty back lot, and several years after the accidental delivery that changed everything, Dana Whitfield had turned an overlooked patch of land into the foundation of a business she never planned to start, built one carefully dried, carefully sanded slab at a time, proof that patience and a willingness to learn could turn even an unwanted pile of lumber into a lasting livelihood for her whole family.